evening, good evening. It is Sunday yet again, September 12th of 2021. Thank you and good evening to everyone who has joined me. My name is Javi and this is Sunday Night Magic. So, welcome to the show. Tonight we have a very interesting episode that I hope that you're going to enjoy. I'll do my best to monitor the comments and, include everyone and get everyone's input. Your opinions and feedback for this episode is actually very important because we're pretty much doing like our first impressions as well as going over Magic the Gathering's next upcoming set. So, without further ado, our topic for tonight is the Innistrad Midnight Hunt set that is coming out at the end of this month of September. If you don't really have any details about that, I did do a previous episode. I believe that was episode 11 with my guests, Sir Freddy and also Jake, both from the Variable Play Network, and where we talked about the announcements that came from Magic the Gathering and Wizards of the Coast. That includes the launch information also for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So, also, right before we get into the topic of today's show, I just want to mention some sponsors. So, right here we have Cardcore. So my personal business that helps Magic players here in the Philippines liquidate their Magic collections, and then also the Guild of Mages for anyone that is looking to order cards from the United States or also even sell or ship their cards over to cardkingdom.com. Definitely look up the Guild of Mages on Facebook or even just message me. I can definitely help you out with that. I am also involved with them now with several of their projects. So, um, good times for Magic. All right. So, let's go ahead and just jump into the topic today. So, again, it's not any top 10 lists or anything like that. Instead, we're going to be talking about the new set that's about to come out by the end of the month of September. And pretty much, I want to give you an idea of what to expect, how the story is shaping out to be, and then also highlight several cards and mechanics that players can look forward to. I am going to be focusing a little bit more on the commander aspect of things, but I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of crossover into the different formats here. So, for anyone that is watching, if you do have comments with regards to any of the other formats that I'm not going to be, or I failed to mention, definitely please share them and I will include them into the show today. So, Innistrad is a plane that was introduced in Magic the Gathering several years ago. This set of Innistrad Midnight Hunt is actually going to be the third time that Magic has taken us to this plane. This is a plane wherein werewolves and vampires are at a eternal struggle, where humans pretty much just serve the purpose of food for both opposing clans of werewolves and vampires. And where other things come into play is that there are, of course, humans that are experimenting with the undead. So you have like the zombies, you also have the devils. So you have some supernatural beings like ghosts and spirits. That it is primarily really like a horror themed set. And on paper, it actually looks really good. Although I am personally not really a big fan of Innistrad. We did talk about this several episodes ago that this kind of timed with the release of or the hype of the Twilight series, and the correlation it just didn't work for me, to be honest. But the second time around that they went back to this plane for Shadows over Innistrad, they introduced the whole eldritch horror, that they started putting in elder gods, and they kind of tied it in with the Eldrazi. And the Eldrazi, if you're not aware, is also sort of like a villain clan type tribe that was introduced into Magic lore, that they are the colorless that live between the planes and ethers. So they're a very ominous group of monsters, and they're actually organized, and they have like three specific like deities that control them. And one of them was named Emrakul. And for the storyline of Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon, um, Emrakul got imprisoned in the moon of Innistrad. So essentially, the way that that story ended up is that the bad guy or the villain of the story was imprisoned in the moon of Innistrad. Now, that might just seem like, you close the book, end of chapter. But what they've done with this is made it very interesting in that you have the villain controlling the moon, so to speak. So the land of Innistrad has been losing daylight more and more, and the night has been extending. So in a realm or in a plane of werewolves and vampires, humans only have the daytime really for respite. And now that daytime is going away, the werewolves are kind of going insane, that they're going crazy. I mean, they have more time to hunt, and it's leading them to become more violent. For the vampires, we are not sure yet. The Crimson Vow set will follow after Midnight Hunt, so this is primarily focused on the werewolf faction of things. And pretty much humans are getting desperate. This is leading them to pretty much commune with nature and other sources looking for an answer. So with warlocks, with druids, and it pretty much is taking on this little festival type feel that they refer to it as the Harvest Tide Festival. And for those of you that are familiar with horror movie genres, that this is very akin to a recent movie that came out called Midsommar. That all of the people seem to be trying to invoke something to bring back the sun to Innistrad, to bring back crops, bring back fertility, and bring back like pretty much the land, because it's dying from eternal night. And who they're invoking, or what they're actually, or whose side, or who they're turning to for help to fight against the werewolves and vampires, still leads to be seen, which is, I think, going to be very interesting, because they have released the very first story to start off this expansion. It is called The Witch of the Woods. If you haven't had a chance, please go over to magicthegathering.com, and pretty much there, like, it's like episode 1 of the full story that you can kind of get into it. So you're in a plane that is slowly losing daylight. Humans are getting desperate. The werewolves are kind of going crazy. The vampires, there's not too much explained yet about them, but they are there. So now we move into what you can expect and what the set brings. So the very first thing is that we're going to go over returning mechanics. And we start off first with Magic the Gathering's obsession with the number 13. So the Innistrad sets have included abilities and effects that have always taken the number 13 into consideration. So these two examples from the new set, the very first one is Olivia's Midnight Ambush. If you are not familiar with the name Olivia, so this is one namesake character, is Olivia Voldaren, one of the heads of the vampires. So in this set, she is involved in some way. So it is an ambush card, and it reads as follows. It's a 2 to cast instant. Target creature gets -2/-2. Now, if it's night, they get -13/-13 instead. Now, you may be asking, what do they mean by night? That will be explained in just a little bit. But primarily, the number 13 shows up again as long as certain conditions are met. Now, another thing that's also returning is the alternate win condition. So they introduced the concept of the Laboratory Maniac, that if you're not able to draw a card, you win the game. So now they have the Triskaidekaphile. It's a 2 to cast 1/3 wizard, human wizard. You do not have a maximum hand size. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game. And included is an ability that lets you draw cards. So it is an alternate win condition, which Innistrad has done in the past. and also incorporates the number 13. So it's like a two-hitter here. So first thing that players can expect is a lot of 13 being incorporated into the abilities of these cards. Next thing that players can expect is a returning mechanic known as Investigate. So this, for example, is the Brayer Bridge Tracker. It is a human scout that says that when Brayer Bridge Tracker enters the battlefield, investigate. Investigate pretty much means that you create a clue token. So I've included a sample of what the clue token looks like. It is pretty much a token artifact, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. So pretty much investigation, it gets you more information if you put in resources. And pretty much you get a card, which is again, resource for resource. It's actually a really good mechanic. And what makes this a little unique from previous iterations of the investigate ability is that they have incorporated now a secondary effect, which is what I'm going to say, or I'll maybe call tokens matter. Because the final ability of the Brayer Bridge Tracker reads as follows. As long as you control a token, the tracker gets +2/+0. So it becomes a 4/3. Essentially, if you have a token, it doesn't even have to be the clue token itself. If you have any other creature token of any kind, that this effect still is taken into consideration. It's still in effect. So this hasn't really been done before. I know that there are abilities and effects that say tokens get this, destroy all tokens, but this is the first time that a condition that if you have a token in play, you get a benefit. So this is an interesting extension of design space that certain cards want tokens to be in play, which means that you won't really just immediately use the tokens. Remind you that the set prior to this, the Adventures from the Forgotten Realms, also had a lot of treasure token abilities, which means that even just having a treasure token and not using it, just keeping it in play, can make certain cards from this set, from the Midnight Hunt, have additional abilities. So it's interesting to see how they've expanded the ability of investigate or even just tokens, and then added just a little bit more that you can benefit from. Another returning mechanic, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but you know what? It will be covered again also in later slides. So they are bringing back flashback. So this card, for example, is called Light Up the Night. It is 1 red and X. It is a sorcery. It allows you to deal X damage to any target. It deals X+1 instead if it is a creature or planeswalker. But essentially, you can use this to shoot an opponent directly in the face, but you don't get the +1. Fine. Now, another interesting thing that they're adding into their design concept here is they are bringing back flashback, which allows you to cast this spell from your graveyard. So once you do, it is removed from the game permanently. But so this means that you get second use of your spells. But they are changing the costs a bit. So for this example, the flashback is 3 in a red, plus you can remove X loyalty counters from among planeswalkers you control, and X can't be 0. So it replaces the X effect that was pretty much in the initial way that you're supposed to feed mana into this spell. And now when you decide to use it again, they incorporated or pretty much added in an alternate cost, so to speak, instead of using your life, instead of maybe discarding cards, that they used loyalty tokens of planeswalkers. So this is interesting in that there are maybe very few examples that ever come up that use loyalty tokens, but it's nice that flashback has returned, but it's a different way of running flashback. I mean, there's still, I'm sure there's still going to be the traditional flashback cards, but this is like the next step for it, which I think is very interesting. And from the artwork, this is pretty much like a little bit of the spoiler that I mentioned, is that we see the artwork of Chandra Nalar, which means that she is included in this set. Although, again, I will talk about it later, not in Planeswalker form. So It there's pros and cons to that. There's too many versions, I think, of Chandra at this time, so maybe they're saving her for the vampire set. Not really sure, but we'll see. Hey, we have a comment. All right, okay. So Mikey just sent in a comment. Thank you, Mikey, for joining. So kind of disappointed in the werewolves in the set. They don't really lend much to the werewolf tribal EDH. Well, you know what? Just to be fair, though, they did introduce a werewolf commander, so to speak. So I think that it does have some contribution. But you know what? I think that there are a lot of other pieces in this set that will definitely be incorporated into EDH. I did set up a couple of my favorite picks from the set that I will feature later on. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily a werewolf deck builder, so I can't say for my say really if everything in the set helps or it doesn't. But you know, if you are currently building it, thank you for the feedback. That is something to take into consideration. So, yep. So they printed werewolves, day and night bomb mechanic. Okay, yep. So you know what? Actually, it may also require the Crimson Vow set to come out in order to really finish off what they're trying to do. We'll see. So I'll try to cover and also feature a little bit more of those cards here. But yeah, in terms of EDH, there isn't really a specific werewolf like build. But you know what? The werewolf commander is still something to look forward to. So jumping back into what people can expect from the new set. So we've already talked about Investigate. We've talked about the number 13 being incorporated into cards. Now we've just done Flashback. Next thing here is they are also bringing back the curses. So curses are enchantments that actually target players. So these, for example, are, well, the blue one specifically, the Curse of Surveillance is something very interesting in that it attaches to a player. It costs 5, which is kind of expensive. But at the beginning of the enchanted player's upkeep, any number of target players other than that player can draw a card equal to the number of curses attached to that player. So you can just keep putting on curses on one player and everyone can reap the benefits. So there's pros and cons to that in that you're also helping your other opponents, but you are also benefiting with card draw. So still something to think about, but it's nice that they are pushing curses more. And we also do have a little bit of information later on to cover that. So, hey, more comment. Hey, Mikey, which is ironic that they need help with the vampire set to finish off werewolves. Yes. I mean, this set includes some vampires and has werewolves. So that means that the other set will also include werewolves and vampires. The idea here is that Magic no longer does the 3-block set and then they stop really doing the 2-block set. This is technically kind of like a return to the 2-block set, but they decided that they wanted to give priority to like one half of the story and faction. So yeah, it's a little too soon to tell how it's going to impact both sets overall. I mean, they're even combining both into the double feature draft set. So they really did intend for these two to play together or be played together, so to speak. So time will tell. By the time the year ends, we will have both sets ready, and maybe we'll be able to see if really the werewolf faction have the support they need. But for now, you know, there are three expansions, or yeah, 3 blocks that have gone through Innistrad, which means that there is at least a good pool already of werewolf cards and in red and green that can be used as in a commander deck. So, stepping outside of curses, the next thing that we are also going to be seeing in the set is that the return of the transform mechanic. So what you have on screen here is actually the original version of how transform work. These are double-sided cards, as you can see on the top left corner. There is a sun and a moon symbol to signify the initial or like the front face of the card being the sun, followed by the flip side, which is the moon. So this is a double-sided card, which means that you are going to have to use opaque sleeves. Otherwise, this is going to be like a marked card. Well, that's never going to be a problem like for the arena players, but pretty much for paper magic, this is a double-sided card. The front side shows a human werewolf, while the back side shows a just pure werewolf. And it has no casting cost, which means that you can never really bring this in as the werewolf side. You will always start at human. And pretty much the abilities that this card has is not necessarily that significant. But to explain how this works, if you're looking at the left side, the Scorned Villager, you'll see that it says at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Scorned Villager. And then vice versa, if you're looking at Moonscarred Werewolf, at the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform Moonscarred Werewolf. So if no spells or if 2 or more were played, this causes the card to flip back and forth and transform. So they decided to kind of simplify this in a way because there's so much to take into consideration. If you have like 4 copies of this card, or if you have different versions or different creatures, they all have the same wording here that if somebody plays no spells or 2 spells, then it transforms. How they fix this in the new set is they have turned it into an actual ability. And for example, here we have the Reckless Stormseeker. So it still has the sun symbol. And on the right side, it has the moon symbol for the Storm Charge Slasher. Basically, it is again a creature that transforms. But instead of the wording of 2 spells and no spells, you see that it has an ability called Daybound. If a player casts no spells during their own turn, okay, it becomes night the next turn. And then that means that everything that is that once it becomes night, everything that has this ability will flip over to night. And then if it's night, okay, nightbound. If a player casts at least 2 spells during their turn, it becomes day next turn. So they finally they kind of adjusted the way that this ability works in that instead of transforming the card, you totally shift the conditions of the game, putting it in night and day. And to help you out, they actually even created an official like card or token with some flavor text that also explains how night and day work. So as it becomes day, transform all nightbound permanents. If a player casts no spells, it becomes night. Okay, then when it becomes night, transform all daybound and vice versa. All right, so basically, they made it into an official ability, and it plays out just like how it would normally do, but now uses keywords, which I think simplifies the process and actually also becomes more of like a state-based effect for the entire board, which means it affects all permanents. All right, comment. Hey, all right, Mikey. Okay, that's Watsy's sales pitch. OCD people want to buy 2 copies of double face cards to prevent having to flip. Yes. So, you know what? Most players in Commander would maybe buy 2 versions of the card so that they can play the front side and then have the flip one off the back, like in a box, so that they don't have to keep flipping the actual card. Now, there is also going to be the tokens that can be placeholders for these cards. And those serve those purposes, especially for drafts, because it's considered a marked card. So having a token or a proxy, so to speak, for those cards is very important. So this one also for day and night, this is going to be a double-sided card, albeit it is a token. But you know what? It's going to be very important because also moving forward into Commander, there are going to be cards that may consider day and night and would definitely need to be incorporated into Commander. So I'm definitely getting myself a day and night card because you never know when somebody will bring or add a card into their deck that takes this into consideration. Similar to Ascend, similar to Monarch, that there are some effects, just like emblems, that you do need these reminders moving forward because if some, there is going to be no day state. It's neither day or night when the day begin or when a game begins, but there might just be a card that will affect that. So moving to the next things that I wanted to show you is that here we also have some cards that actually affect the way that day and night works. For example, we have the Component Collector. It is a 3 to cast 1/4. It is a homunculus, which is like a little slave creature, so to speak. If it's neither day or night, it becomes day as Component Collector enters the battlefield. So if you have cards like this in your commander deck, that means that the concept of day and night is brought into the table and can have effects to everyone's cards. So when it becomes day or night becomes day, you may tap or untap target non-land permanent. So the Component Collector now starts taking into consideration if no spells or if 2 or more are played every turn, and it gets an additional ability, which is pretty useful. Now, another example here is the Moonrager Slash. It is 3 to cast, it is an instant. It deals 3 damage to any target, although this spell will cost 2 less if it is night. So if you have cards that can incorporate or change the day and night cycle of a game, you can also benefit with these spells. Moonrager Slash has actually already been dubbed as the Nightlig Bolt, which is an homage to Lightning Bolt, which is pretty much the basis of this card. So the set is going to really also incorporate day and night and how it affects the cards in it. And where that translates over to Commander is that day and night may become a factor if you incorporate or add certain cards onto your deck builds. Along with this, players can also expect Transform to make a return. So Transform is very interesting. It was introduced in Innistrad, but in a different way. So the example that we showed a while ago for the werewolves takes into consideration spell count, while this example, it still has the sun and moon, but certain conditions need to be met in order for the card to transform. So this is actually how they usually deal with cards that are not red and green. The werewolf faction cards always take into consideration the whole day and night cycle. Although there are now cards in the set that are not werewolf related that do take night and day into consideration. This, for example, is the Enduring Angel. It is a 5 to cast 3/3 flying double strike angel that says you have hexproof. If your life total would be reduced to 0 or less, instead transform Enduring Angel and your life total becomes 3. And then if Enduring Angel didn't transform this way, you lose the game. So it is actually a high risk that you could potentially lose the game. That means that if somebody stifles the effect, so to speak, that if they negate it from happening, then yes, you will probably lose. But the idea here is that if your life hits 0, you will be set back to 3 life. And this card flips over. It is a flying angel. You still have hexproof. And then suddenly its power and toughness is equal to your life total. And whenever it attacks, double your life total. So it has a way of picking you back up and getting your life total where it needs to be so that you can win. But again, this doesn't take any 0 or 2 or more spell counts into consideration. Instead, this transform effect has certain conditions that need to be met in order for it to trigger. So this is something that players can look forward to into the cards that are coming out in Midnight Hunt. Along with this, they are also bringing in new abilities. So now we're going to turn towards the new mechanics that come in with Midnight Hunt. So first, Transform has day and night. That is like, let's say, a refinement of a previous ability. Then they have the triggers, which is what we're showing in these cards. Now they are also bringing in an ability called Disturb. So the example to the left is called a Malevolent Hermit. and its backside is called Benevolent Geist. So this is a double-sided card, much like all of the other transform abilities. But, okay, Malevolent Hermit reads as follows. It is a 2 to cast 2/1 human wizard. You can pay a blue, sacrifice it, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. So this is a human that can essentially counter a spell. Once he is dead and sitting in your graveyard, you can use Disturb. You pay 3, you may cast this card from your graveyard transformed for its Disturb cost. So, pretty much they put flashback on creatures. You can bring it back in, but it comes back as a different version of itself. It will come into play as the Benevolent Geist. It is a 2/2 flying, non-creature spells you control can't be countered, which is great. It offers spell protection. But, as is the case for all creatures with Disturb, if Benevolent Geist would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So, if it dies a second time, it is gone forever, which means that this is pretty much creature flashback. You get a creature, you get a second use of it, but this time around, if it dies, it's permanently gone. So, this is a unique mechanic added into the set, and this card specifically was something that I wanted to use an example because the disturbed side of it, the Benevolent Geist side, is actually really interesting in that it offers protection for your non-creature spells. So I really see that this card is going to be seeing a lot of commander play. All right, some comments. Hey, hi Mark. Thank you very much. Good evening, kaibigan. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any comments or anything that you'd like to share, please add it in. All right, so again, I featured this card specifically for the example of Disturb because I really do see that this particular card is going to see a lot of play in Commander. It is a living counter spell, and then it offers spell protection when it comes back into the game. You can't go wrong with that. And the fact that its ability is 1 blue and sacrifice it, it has no tap ability, which means that it can be used immediately. It doesn't take Summoning Sickness into consideration. Although it is a little bit limited in that it can only target non-creature spells. That still might be very important, especially like in a CEDH environment. So, next ability that they're also adding into Magic through the Midnight Hunt set is an ability called Decayed. So, this is going to be printed on certain cards, specifically zombie tokens. So, looking at the left, you have a card called No Way Out. It is a 3 to cast spell. It says target opponent discards 2 cards, and then you create a 2/2 black zombie token with Decayed. Decayed never existed in any other set, so this is brand new to Midnight Hunt, as I mentioned. What does Decayed mean? It means that the creature that has Decayed cannot block, and if it attacks, you sacrifice it at end of combat. This pretty much means that you get one-shot or single attack creatures, which isn't that great to be honest. But if it's just tacked onto certain abilities, like using No Way Out, for example, you can pay 3 and have somebody discard 2 cards. That actually already exists in different forms of Magic cards. But then you also get a 2/2, which makes it just a little bit better than its previous or predecessors, basically. I mean, if it's even as simple as just some of the basic effects that get a creature from your graveyard back to hand, and you get a 2/2, yeah, I mean, it's a cherry on top. It's a little bit of a bonus that you might be able to use. I mean, you can't block with it, but at least it's gonna be one use attacker. So in standard or in other formats, this really may even be the difference of being able to clap back and just alpha strike an opponent. In the world of Commander, a 2/2 really isn't that significant, but it is sack fodder, which means that you could probably even sacrifice these tokens for benefits. So that's still something to take into consideration. The next ability that's going to be added into the set is known as Coven. So Coven is going to be the ability specifically used by the humans of the set, and Coven reads as follows. Um, it pretty much here for this example, it reads that you can choose a color. Sun Gold Sentinel gains hexproof from that color until end of turn. Now, actually, Coven only comes into that last sentence. It says activate only if you control three or more creatures with different powers. So, Coven introduces activated abilities, but they are restricted in that you need to have three creatures that have different powers. So, Sun Gold Sentinel is a 3/2. If you have a 1/1 and if you have a 2/2, even a 0/1, you meet the conditions. So this is similar to an older ability that they had for the Boros Legion called Battalion. If you attacked with three or more creatures, Battalion would trigger. This time around, you just need to own creatures with three different powers. They don't have to attack or anything like that. But basically, Coven requires you to have at least three creatures with three different powers, which is sort of building on the whole story here, in that the humans are coming together to try to stop the endless night from happening. Story wise, it has good flavor. Mechanically, that means that this thing doesn't really do much on its own. So Sun Gold Sentinel, for example, is a 2 to cast 3/2. Not bad. Human Soldier, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you exile one card from a graveyard. So it has its use, and pretty much you can use it as an attacker. You can use it to exile cards from your opponent's graveyard, take away their creatures that can be disturbed, flashback cards. So it has its utility. But its second effect here for Coven, that it will gain protection from a color and can't be blocked by creatures of that color, can only really happen once you have like an army established. So that's I'm really seeing as too many hoops. I'm not happy with the Coven effect. There are several examples, of course. I included this one really to show you that the cards themselves are serviceable, but the Coven ability requires way too much for what you get out of it. So, you can expect to see it. It might really play a more significant role in standard format, but for Commander, maybe. I don't know if it'll ever get that late in the game. So we'll see. All right. So next is a series of cards. So most sets always include like one particular type of card in all of the colors. So for the Midnight Hunt, they are introducing the adversaries. There are 5, which means every color gets an adversary, and they are all mythic rare. I put 2 up here on screen because I feel that these are the 2 most significant of the 5 and will definitely play a role in Commander. Bloodthirsty Adversary and Tainted Adversary are both 2 to cast, and pretty much they have their own individual abilities, but they have a secondary effect, is that when this enters the battlefield, you can pay. So, for example, Bloodthirsty Adversary says that you can pay 2 and a red any number of times. So it's similar to an effect called Multi-Kicker. But instead of using that, I think that the design in Magic, they decided not to go with the keyword Multi-Kicker because there are cards that already affect kicker costs or that even contribute to it, and it's more skewed towards green. So I guess in a way of trying to balance these cards, they avoided using the keyword. That's my take on it. I could be wrong, but I think that leaving the card as is and not getting any help from older sets helps balance it. And for paying this cost, you get any number of times, you get a benefit. So using Bloodthirsty Adversary as an example, is that when you pay this cost 1 or more times, it gets +1/+1 counters. And then you may exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery that costs 3 or less from your graveyard, and then you copy it for free. So you get free spells out of this. While the Tainted Adversary, gets +1/+1 counters, and then makes twice that many decayed zombies. So one allows free spells, one makes an army of decayed zombies for a pretty big swing later on. Um, the other ones, the green, white, and blue, to be honest, are not really that significant or noteworthy to bring up. Maybe the white because it serves as like a living anthem, but these two I think are going to be the standout cards that we'll see play in Commander. So that's definitely two cards that players should look out for. So included in this set is the adversaries. Now, moving back to the story, we're also going to focus now on the people who play a significant role in the story, the Planeswalkers. Pretty much sort of like the embodiment of us as a player in the story. Magic used to play in a way that we were the Planeswalkers, but now they do have namesake characters already introduced into the stories that you get to play as. So for Midnight Hunt, one of the lead characters in the story is Arlen the Pax Hope. So this is, I believe, the third time that Arlen has been printed in Planeswalker form. And as you see, she does have the day and nightbound mechanic built into her. So Arlen is pretty much one of the namesakes or one of the key characters in the story. Um, Next to her, I mean, I included here just so that you can see both sides, that as the Pax Hope and also as the Moon's Fury. Um, there are some story cards related to her. I believe that there's actually a total of 14 story cards in this set. So these are specific cards that tell the story of what happened. Like I said, the story is only coming out. I don't want to spoil it. I just wanted to give you an overview of what's happening in this set. I think really the journey of discovery and figuring out what the whole set is about is something that players might want to seek out themselves. Two more planeswalkers that players can expect is our ever faithful Teferi. So Teferi is making his way into Innistrad. So this is Teferi who slows the sunset. And one of the very first cards spoiled for this entire set is Ren N7, previously known as Ren N6. Story-wise, I don't really see any entries of Ren. I'm not sure if he actually does play a role in the overall story of Midnight Hunt, but Teferi and Arlen do. A couple of other characters that did not have any Planeswalker printings, but I wanted to just feature them as well. So the set has 3 Planeswalkers, but these cards do show that Kaya is included in the story. So Thraben Exorcism has her in the artwork and actually mentions Chandra, which I featured in the back card earlier. So Chandra, Teferi, and Arlen, and Kaya. So that means that you have a total of 4 planeswalkers that are sort of being set as the protagonists. But the next card here, Fateful Absence, also brings in Soren Markov, which means that there are a total of 5 planeswalker characters involved in the story of Midnight Hunt. Although these planeswalkers did not get any card printings. I figured that maybe Chandra, Sorin, and Kaya might show up in the Crimson Vow set. I can't say for certain right now, but having them in the artwork, and actually, if you look at the bottom of these are really specific also story spotlight cards. So these are 2 of the 14 cards that pretty much tell the story of what happens in Midnight Hunt. So that's it for the Planeswalkers. So next to that, a couple of other things that I also wanted to, show and share with you guys is the very first one here is these are cards that I'm sort of looking forward to and I think are going to have a very big impact in Commander. So first one is called the Consuming Blob. The Consuming Blob costs 5, and it says that it has power equal to the number of cards in your graveyard, and then also same for the toughness but +1. So this is essentially a 5 to cast version of an older card which I put here to the right called Tarmogoyf. So It is a different creature type, but they both have the exact same abilities. But funny how they actually moved the whole plus symbol before the asterisk, and now it is after the asterisk. So maybe it's a little bit of a typo, or it's a way that they want the pluses to be added in moving forward. But what makes consuming blob different? I mean, for the same cost, Tarmogoyf is better. It's 2 to cast, it's so much faster. But the consuming blob reads as follows. At the beginning of your end step, you create a green ooze creature that has the exact same effect. Um, Pretty much, it produces Tarmogoyfs. It doesn't create, it doesn't, the copies don't have this ability to replicate, but one ooze can make a bunch of Tarmogoyfs. And if that's left unchecked, I think will play a really significant role in commander tables. It's kind of slow, but 5 to cast is really in the realm of commander rather than standard, I think. And I think that this can get as big as about a 6-7. So I think you can still push that with some new card types, but I think that this is going to see some play in Commander, maybe not on a competitive level considering its cost, but other formats can also definitely benefit from this because in a one-on-one game, you could churn out more copies of a Tarmogoyf rather than in Commander. So look out for this card. Next are actually very important story pieces to Midnight Hunt that I also wanted to show because I think that they do play a very significant role in the game, in the story, and will also be very important cards in Commander. So the first one is the Moon Silver Key. So this is actually a very important part of the story for Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and its abilities read as follows. So it costs 2, it's an artifact, you can pay 1 and sacrifice it. Search your library for an artifact with a mana ability or a basic land, reveal it and put it in your hand. That's actually absolutely busted because looking to the card on the right here, the Celestus, it does produce mana of any color. So this is one example I wanted to include, but you can pretty much tutor or search your library for any artifact that makes mana. There are so many combos that I've featured in previous episodes that just use like Basalt Monolith, Grim Monolith. You can go look for a Soul Ring. You can go look for a Mana Vault. Anything that has a mana ability, which means that you can even go look, let's say, for a Lion's Eye Diamond. This is going to be a very important piece to a lot of decks because it is essentially an artifact shooter that you can use when you need to use it. Or if you're desperate, you can go get a basic land, which I don't think anyone's ever going to use this for. It is an artifact shooter. So this is going to be, I think, a very sought after card in Commander. I definitely want like a foil or full art foil version of this if possible. All right. Hey, hi Ron, good evening. Thank you for joining. So we are going over Midnight Hunt. I hope that you see some cards that you might be interested in. So another card to feature here is the Celestus. This is a 3 to cast legendary artifact. As you can see on the bottom, this is also a story spotlight card. So this plays a very significant role in the story of Midnight Hunt, but it also incorporates some abilities. First off, if it is neither day or night, the Celestus comes in and it makes it day. Okay, so anything that has the effects that have day come into play. Next, you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So it's a mana rock. And then finally, you can pay 3 and tap it. If it's night, it becomes day. Otherwise, it becomes night. Activate as a sorcery. So it's sort of like a weird time machine, so to speak, that you can change the conditions of the game from day or night. And then whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, you gain a life. You may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. So I definitely think that this is going to be a great addition in Commander because we do have a lot of 3 to cast mana rocks that just make mana of any color. But the fact that this incorporates day and night means that if players start playing 2 or more spells, the day and night cycle starts flipping, and you can start gaining life and drawing additional cards for not even doing anything at all. The whole three pay ability to switch day and night, I don't think really plays any significant role, to be honest. Instead, it's just that a three to cast artifact just slips in the day and night mechanic, and you can potentially be gaining a life and drawing and discarding cards. So I think that this again is another must buy or must include in your commander decks moving forward. So a couple of other things here. So just to add in, next is um, board wipes and removal spells that I felt needed to be given some attention. So the first one is called the Meat Hook Massacre. It is a legendary enchantment. Okay, this is an enchantment that actually comes in with a one-time effect. It costs 2 black and X. When Meat Hook Massacre enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X/-X. So this is essentially a board wipe similar to like Toxic Deluge and other spells similar to it. But it stays in the game because it's an enchantment. After it kills everything, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. And then whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you gain a life. So it pretty much has a death trigger for your side and your opponent's side, but it also comes in as a board wipe, which is super significant because you get the benefit immediately. So it might cost you a few creatures, or let's say that you have no creatures at all, that you can wipe out your opponent's board, or opponents, plural. I mean, if we're talking commander, and you can even pick up some life in the process. And then this card stays. It's an enchantment. It actually doesn't go to your graveyard. So right after it serves its purpose, it has a second purpose, which I think is really, really good and will definitely see play in Commander. Next to that is probably one of the best Wrath of God effects that exists right now. There have been so many versions of this, but I think that this is one of the most interesting ones because, okay, Vanquish the Horde costs 6 and 2 white. It pretty much says destroy all creatures. But this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. So this is a white version of another card that deals 13 damage to all creatures. But this is just a flat out destroy effect. I think that this is really going to be another really important card because it can just essentially cost 2 white. And it doesn't even need your opponent's creatures. It considers all creatures on the battlefield. So this one's another card to look out for because it's going to really be a discounted Wrath effect, what people are going to need. And here we go. Yep, Aristocrat board wipe. Yep, it is mythic for Meat Hook Massacre. That is true. But the whole gain life and lose life effect is very Aristocrat in build. That's true. Now, if you incorporate other effects like Vanquish the Horde, I mean, you do have the enchantment version, and then you also have a discounted version. That's only in rare. I don't believe that's not mythic right there. So there's a lot of, I think, really significant cards that are coming into this game from Midnight Hunt that people may not really take into consideration or may have overlooked. So these are the ones that I really think that people should look out for. And actually looking at Vanquish the Horde, just to point it out, it has Audric on the artwork. So this is another returning character that plays a significant role in the Innistrad storyline. So just wanted to add that in there. So that pretty much is where I'm going to be stepping outside. And I mean, that covers already what's in the Midnight Hunt set. So we've done the story, returning mechanics, and then the twist that they've added to them, the brand new mechanics, the planeswalkers, the cycle cards like the adversaries, and a couple of my spotlight cards that I think are going to be significant. But along with this set, they're also going to be releasing 2 pre-constructed commander decks. And so these are the 2 commanders leading them. So the very first one is Leonore, and the second one is Wilhelt. The decks are going to be called Coven Counters and Undead Unleashed. So for Coven Counters, it is a green-white deck, and Undead Unleashed is black and blue. So if these are the color combinations that you are interested in, I've done actually an episode already for black and blue, like my top commanders. I have not done green and white yet, so I might take this into consideration. So Leonor uses the Coven effect, while Wilhelt uses the Decayed effect. And pretty much along with this, there are also some other things that players can look forward to. So you will notice though that they're only dual color decks, but there is going to be another cycle of cards included in the commander decks that are known as visions. So here are two examples. First one is called Visions of Dread, and it's basically a sorcery that has a flashback effect, and it takes into consideration the command zone. So let's read this as it's written. Visions of Dread is a 3 to cast spell, 2 and a black. Sorcery. Target opponent puts a creature card from their choice from their graveyard into the battlefield under your control. So basically, you're stealing creatures from your opponent's graveyard, but it's their choice which they're giving you. Now, the flashback costs 10. That's 2 black and 8. This spell costs X less to cast this way, where X is the greatest mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So from 10 to cast, you pretty much reduce it by the cost of your commander, but only really the colorless part. So maybe at the most, you're going to be paying 2 black if you have a commander that costs that much. So pretty much, I mean, that is an interesting look again. I mean, they're trying to experiment with how flashback works, and now they're also taking into consideration the command zone. They're trying to incorporate the two with each other. So that's some interesting design space, and these are the first spells of its kind, which means that they may be able to refine that moving forward. This doesn't have to be tied specifically to the set, but it is right there. One thing that I wanted to point out, though, is that if you're looking here, this is a red spell that comes from the commander decks. But wait, neither of these commanders have red. So how is it possible that they are going to be including red cards in the commander sets? And this is where things get a little weird, because they are introducing 8 cards that are commander or have the MIC code if you're looking on the bottom left here. So it's supposed to be Midnight Hunt. So this is Midnight Hunt Commander. But there are going to be 5 cards that are not available in the commander decks and can only be acquired through set boosters, which is very strange. But there is one specific highlight that I wanted to bring in here, and that is a new potential commander known as Lind, the Cheerful Tormentor. So again, she also has the Midnight Hunt commander symbol, and she is red, black, and blue. But that means that she's in neither of the 2 pre-constructed commander decks. This creature can only be acquired through set boosters, and it's a mythic at that, which means it's going to be even harder to acquire this card. What makes her interesting, first off, is that she's a warlock, so finally a little bit more support for the warlock type. Although I'm like, my warlock type is Esper, which is blue white black. So Grixis black blue red is interesting, and that it's nice that there is another Grixis commander, but really there's already way too many good Grixis commanders at this point. She's a 2/4 death touch and incorporates curses. This is the first commander that really specifically builds their ability around the curses, which is a returning effect from the Innistrad Midnight Hunt set. Why I wanted to include this is also just to highlight that this is probably the most significant of the 8 cards that are going to be printed only in set boosters, that you cannot acquire them from pre-constructed commander decks for this set. Also, that this is a little bit of a flavor win, so to speak, because if you're looking at the artwork, you have Lind tormenting, or more or less like sticking needles into like a voodoo doll, so to speak. And if you are not familiar with the character or that doll, this is actually a character that has been featured in Commander 2017. He doesn't really have a name at all. This is just like the unluckiest planeswalker ever. But the original curses all have him in the artwork, all 5 versions. So we actually find out now who's been cursing him. So it's a bit of a flavor win, which I think that a lot of people might appreciate. And also the fact that you have a curse focused commander. But I think that where you're going to be losing people is that you can only acquire this card from set boosters, and it's a mythic, which means that the availability is going to be very scarce, which means that if you really want to build around this, you're going to have to be prepared to fork up some money. So that's it also now for the commanders. So we're done with the set, and also we've talked a little bit of things that people can look forward to when we are looking at the pre-constructed commander decks. Some final things that I just wanted to share with everyone that you might find interesting is, first off, is the Champion of the Parish will have a extended alternate art as a buy a box card. So if you're buying booster boxes, you can expect to have an alternate version of the Champion of the Parish, which is like a flip or reimagined version of Champion of the Parish. And then also the card that I showed a while ago with the number 13 being a significant number, the Triskaidekaphile, has an alternate version as part of purchasing a bundle. So you can see on the bottom left of the cards here that the champion has buy a box and the Triskaidekaphile has bundle. So you can only acquire these cards from purchasing those specific Magic products. And along with the launch of this new set, they are also going to be bringing in the Store Championship. If you haven't seen anything about the Store Championship, I encourage you to go back 2 episodes. Episode 11, I did cover that with Sir Freddy and Jake. But along with that, we finally have some more additional information. So the very first one here is the Bring a Friend promo. So if you bring a friend to a Magic event, you could get a alternate art foil Mind Stone. And then next to that, you have the Commander event. So this is different from the Store Championship, which is going to be like standard because you're going to be playing with the Midnight Hunt set. But for Commander, people are encouraged to just bring a deck and play, and you can get yourself a copy of Conjurer's Closet, which is also a card that was introduced from the original Innistrad set, I believe. So it is something very interesting in that there are some cards that players can look forward to as the set releases. So that pretty much wraps up today's episode for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. I hope that you are looking forward to the set as much as I am. I did try to put in as much information as I can for what you're going to be looking to see and what you can expect from this upcoming set. Some highlight cards and some things that I think are going to be very significant to Commander and other formats. Thank you to those who have been watching. I really appreciate those who came in to comment and throw in their 2 cents. And for those of you who are just watching, I do see that, well, at this point, we hit maybe about 10 or 11 viewers at one time. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you guys catch me on the next episode. So until next time, keep gaming.